My name is Kiara Monette, and I'm a speech language pathologist.
Hey there, I'm Heaven and welcome back to my channel. This is the third video in my Women's History Month series called In Her Lane, Career Conversations with some of my friends. And today I'm so excited to welcome my friend Kiara.
Hi everybody!
She is a speech language pathologist, and in this video we're just going to break down what speech language pathologists do, how she got into her career, what she finds the most rewarding, and maybe some helpful tips for people, women especially, who might be interested in that. So if that is of interest to you, then keep on watching. So Kiara, can you tell the people what is a speech language pathologist and what do you do?
A speech language pathologist is someone who helps individuals with their communication, cognitive functioning, swallowing, or social emotional skills.
Do you work with adults primarily or do you work with kids?
So right now I work with kids. I work at a middle school and I work at a high school. And I'm at the high school half of the week and then the middle school the other half. But you can work with adults as an SLP. And SLP is an abbreviation for speech language pathologist.
Being that you work with kids mostly, it sounds like you get to your patients through the school. Is that right?
Yes, I do.
So typically, how does that look for perhaps people who don't work in schools? How do they get connected with speech language pathologists to know that they need care?
It depends. If you're in a private clinic setting, then most of the time parents will have noticed that their child has some difficulties with their communication or swallowing or those social emotional things that I mentioned earlier. And then they'll have the child come in and be evaluated by an SLP. And then the SLP will determine if the services are needed for the child or not. Now, if it's an adult and it's like in a hospital setting, it just depends. If an adult comes into the setting and they're having difficulties with cognitive functioning, then they'll be evaluated by an SLP. Or if they have difficulties with swallowing, they're evaluated by an SLP as well. And then from there, they receive the services based off of the evaluation results.
Okay. I want to get into what like a typical, if you can describe a typical day looks like. But before that, let's go back to undergrad because Kiara and I also met in undergrad at the University of Florida. I met Timria there. I met Christina there. I met Kiara there. So obviously UF is doing something right. Okay. I'm not going to give them too much, but they're doing something right. And so you were studying linguistics in undergrad. I don't think I've ever met anybody who studied linguistics before. So help me understand how you chose that major, and did you always know you were going to lead to being an SLP?
When I first entered UF, I was interested in education. I originally wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. On my dad's,
you can totally see that.
Okay, yeah. On my dad's side of the family is full of educators, so I grew up being around educators, and I just always felt like a sense of accomplishment when I teach someone something that I know. So I knew I wanted to go the education route, and then once I got to UF, I started looking into majors that had teaching aspects in them, but weren't necessarily a teacher. Then I thought I wanted to be an occupational therapist, which is another rehabilitation therapy that kind of works really close to SLPs and physical therapists. They're all in the rehab team. So I shadowed an OT, and then when I was shadowing OT, I'm like, yeah, they're moving around a little bit too much for me.
What do you mean moving around?
So with OT, they're working on like daily skills, such as like writing, brushing your teeth, things like that, like those daily activities. And I just felt like it was too much movement for me. And I also like to talk. I like to yap. So I was like, what is going to allow me to...
I didn't know that about you.
You didn't? Girl, now you know you like... But yeah, I'm like, what is going to allow me to yap but still be like therapy and teaching? And then there was an SLP that was there, and then I ended up communicating with her, and I observed her, and I fell in love with it. And she was working with a little baby. Now, when it came to linguistics, I've always had an interest in language. Like, even in high school, I took 2 years of Spanish. And I just always wanted to learn how to best learn languages. And I knew that that went closely with being an SLP. So I wanted to go that route, but still get my minor in speech language pathology. So that way, even if for some reason SLP didn't end up being what I wanted to do long term, I could still use my linguistics major to teach English as a second language in other countries, which is what a lot of people do who major in linguistics. They go that TESOL route. So yeah. I was interested in doing that at the time, possibly. And then I said, by the time I graduate, I would have figured out what route I want to go into. And then by the time I graduated, I had observed multiple SLPs and just fallen in love with the profession from there.
What additional education or certification is required before you can officially be an SLP and work with patients unsupervised?
You need to get a master's, which is typically a 2-year program. And then from there, you do a clinical fellowship year, which is what I'm in right now. So technically, I'm a speech language pathologist clinical fellow.
Okay.
And when you are getting your master's, I know some programs, they allow you to do clinicals during the master's years, which is what my program was structured as. But then other people, they'll do like the academic work for like a year and a half, and then they'll take half of year doing clinicals. And clinicals is you getting that hands-on experience in whatever setting your clinical setting is in, and then you're being supervised. So that way, when you do finish with graduate school and you're out there on your own, you have that experience in the actual setting that you're interested in going into. Because a lot of the times we learn things in books, but until you actually have to apply it in real life, or you're in these situations that require you to think on your feet and move fast, you don't really absorb how to handle those situations until you're in them.
It's like principle versus practice. It's like, yeah, this is how you would do it in the book A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
And then what if like a patient says this and they go off script from what you've learned in the textbook? So that type of thing. So I do think clinical rotations is a very important part of it. So yeah, graduate school for 2 years, the clinical hours, which is 400 hours.
Over how much time?
It depends on the program you're in. I know for me, I had 3 different settings. I was at a middle school, I did a private pediatric extended care, and then I did an acute rehab hospital. So in between those 3 settings, I got those 400 clinical hours where I was being supervised. And then after that, once you graduate, then you apply for your provisional license. And from there, you can work as a speech language pathologist clinical fellow. And then that whole year, you're working in the field. You still have a mentor, but you don't have like direct supervision.
This is what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. But I know that you have to get a certain amount of hours in your clinical fellowship year in order to move on and get your C's, which is your certificate of clinical competence. So after that 1 year of being a clinical fellow and meeting all the requirements that you need to meet during that time, as for meeting with your mentor multiple times and having them observe you for 6 hours in total for each phase. After that, you apply for your C's, and then you get your certificate of clinical competence, and then you're a full-fledged SLP.
So that's what's coming up next for you. You're going to finish this fellowship year. Then you're getting your C's. And then you're going to be SLP down.
Then I'm going to be SLP down.
What was your clinical setting like when you were in that phase of your education?
So I had 3 different settings. I was at a middle school, a private pediatric extended care, and then an acute care rehab hospital. So the private pediatric extended care, that is like a daycare setting with different rehabs. So OT, PT, and SLP. They were all there, and it was medically fragile children. So I was doing like swallowing therapy in addition to doing communication therapy with the medically fragile students that were there.
What age are these students?
So really, really young. I mean, like I think my youngest patient was around, I don't know if I can say the actual age because of HIPAA, but just know they were really, really young.
They were
under the age of 1.
Toddlers? Okay.
Yeah, under the age of 1.
Infants. Okay, wow. Okay. So what is swallowing therapy? How does that work with a child that young? How does that, help me understand that?
Yeah, so it's a lot of like bottle feeding. So because of the medical fragileness that child has, they may have difficulty with taking a bottle. So it's doing different therapies with them to get them used to taking that bottle. So even when they're not at the private pediatric extended care, if they're with their family, they're able to get the accurate amount of nutrition that they need.
Obviously, you've undergone a lot of education to get to this point, even in your clinical setting. Are there other things as far as like emotional intelligence and I guess empathy and compassion that you feel like you've had to learn or grow in this role? Because what I'm hearing you say is you're dealing with children who have some pretty, like some significant challenges and families as well helping these kids. So help me understand what you're thinking about from like an emotional empathetic standpoint?
Yeah, I will definitely say that to be a successful and effective SLP, you have to be compassionate. You have to be in tune with your emotions and know that you have to make sure that you're pouring into yourself outside of work. So when you do show up to work, you have that bandwidth to give that level of compassion and support that you need to give to your patients. I would say for me, it was a situation and just overall me learning how to be educated in an area, but also being open to receiving constant input from other people on the rehab team, such as those OTs or PTs, the parents, and then depending on the age of the patient themselves, because you may have, studied and have a lot of knowledge on a specific disorder, or effective ways that you think are going to assist that patient, but then you receive input from someone else on the rehab team, or input from the mom, or input from the exact patient, and it just gives you more details about how you should handle that care. So not thinking that you know everything. You have to be open to learning. And as an SLP, you're going to always be learning, because there's always going to be a new and better way to handle addressing a certain communication disorder or cognitive disorder or swallowing disorder. So that's why we have our continuing education units, because you just always need to be in that mind space of learning more.
I want to talk about that. So let's go back to your other two clinical settings. So you had the Extended Stay Pediatric Care Center?
Yeah, the private pediatric extended care.
Okay, what were the other two?
It was an acute rehab center.
And was that
acute rehab hospital.
Was that similar to the pediatric care center, or were they different?
No, it was totally different. I was working with adults there.
Okay.
And then most of them were elderly. So it's acute care rehab. So they're in there and they're trying to get out as fast as possible. Like they're working with an SLP, a PT, and OT. So they are working on different things with each discipline. But with SLP, most of the time it was cognitive therapy. So we're doing things to address like their attention span, executive functioning, being able to recall like short-term memory, long-term memory. So some of those things that we take for granted, but as we age, naturally they decline. And then you add in like a traumatic event, such as like a car crash, or you fall on your hip, or you have a heart attack, like different things like that. And that can affect an individual cognitively as well.
Are these people who have memory loss from like dementia or Alzheimer's? Are you working with those kinds of patients?
Yes, we work with those kinds of patients as well.
What is that like? Because I've seen, might sound really ignorant, but I've seen those videos on TikTok of some of the adults who are caregivers to their parents and navigating that, and that seems really challenging for me, like just to watch over the screen. So what is that like for you with someone who you're working with these people time over time, so you're developing relationships with them and you're kind of seeing this memory loss and how that's affecting them? What was that like?
I would say that is an area that I learned the most in when it came to that setting, is how to handle those situations. So still showing a level of compassion, but not allowing it to get to the point where like you're overridden by your emotions and you can't effectively relay the information to the patient or their family that's there. I know there was one situation specifically where this woman, she was speaking about like, how she's older and she's just ready to go. Like she's lived a beautiful life and she feels like because she's in the hospital, she's burdening her family.
Wow.
So in that moment, like, because I'm such a like empathetic person, I wanted to cry because like I could feel her emotions, and then like just having conversations with her about her family, it just made me very emotional. So in that situation, I just had to pull myself together, keep my composure, and just remind her like, hey, you're not going to be in here long term. You still have a lot of life to live. You still have a lot to give to your family. They love you. And I get that you feel that you've accomplished so much in life that if you were to go, you would still feel good with yourself. But at the end of the day, you still have so much that you can do. Like life, it doesn't matter how old you are. Like there's still so many new adventures, so many new people that you can meet, and then you can still make a huge impact in your family's life.
For sure.
So like in that situation, just me having to control my emotions, I feel like that was one of the biggest things that I learned from there.
Your last clinical setting, tell me about the school.
Yeah, so the school, it was great. I feel like that's where I'm at right now, and I have a decent amount of experience. Even before I entered into graduate school, I was a speech therapist assistant for about 4 years. Yeah, so I did that right after graduating from UF, and then until I went to graduate school, I worked as a SLPA, which is the abbreviation for speech language pathologist assistant. And with that, I worked at a school for 2 years, so I kind of already had that experience in the school setting. Not to say I didn't get a lot from that SLP, because I feel like you learn something new from everyone you interact with in the profession, because everybody has a certain way that they go about giving therapy, or that they structure their day, or just different advice that they can give you that is helpful. In a school setting, students, they have an individual education plan. So an individual
IEP.
Yes, an IEP.
Okay.
Yep, they have an IEP. And then at the initial IEP meeting, the SLP presents to the parents and the ESC staff the communication goals that will be worked on for a full year with the students. And then you determine how many times a week you're going to see that student. So I would say on average in a middle school and high school setting, it's about 30 minutes a week, or 30 minutes bi-weekly with the students. So what I would do in that setting is we would go get the students from their class, or they would just know to naturally come to the speech therapy room at a certain time. And then most of the time we're working on reading comprehension. Some students do still work on speech, but for the most part is reading comprehension with the middle school and high school students. And it's also social and emotional as well, because there will be some autistic students, and although they are performing well in their classes, they still may need that therapy on how to interact with their peers.
Social elements.
Yeah, those social elements. So a lot of social, reading comprehension, and then every few students speech. Yeah.
What are some of the trends you're seeing amongst students? Are there things that kind of stick out to you that are surprising, or that maybe you expected?
I feel like the higher up you go, because in elementary, there's a lot more speech being addressed by the speech
They're still
therapist.
learning the language.
Yeah, they're still learning the language. And then there can be someone who comes from a different country, and like English is not even their first language. So that also adds into the fact that there's more elementary students receiving those services than middle and high school.
I see.
But in middle and high school, I feel like what I thought it would be like is what it's like right now. Like that good mix of the social skills being addressed and a lot of reading passages. Now, something I didn't expect is having to teach the students how to advocate for themselves.
Oh, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I feel like even I have benefited from learning how to teach the students how to advocate for themselves. So a lot of these students, because they have an IEP, they have accommodations. So for example, like extended time to take a test,
right?
Or preferential seating because they get distracted in certain areas of the room. So if a student, for example, let's say they're in the 9th grade and these IEP accommodations have only been in place for them for a couple of months, they may not even be aware of what their accommodations are.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Who's supposed to tell them?
The ESC lead. So whoever
someone
is
at the school.
Yeah, someone at the school. So the case manager, and then a lot of them are invited, all of them actually. Once you get to a certain age, you're invited to attend your IEP meeting, and then the student can choose if they want to come or not. So for me, I know if I'm the case manager for a student and they're coming to my session, in addition to addressing whatever goals they have in place, I also have to remind them like, hey, you have these accommodations. So if they have not been implemented in the classroom, then you have to advocate for yourself and speak up. You have to, go up to your teacher's desk and let them know, I need more time on this assignment. I know it's due tomorrow, or like, if they give it to you the week before, like, I may need longer than a week to do this. Or if you're taking a test and you feel like you need more time, letting your teacher know. Or if you're in the wrong location in the room, asking you move to a different area. And there's so many different accommodations that can go on a student's IEP, and it's for the IEP team to determine what accommodations are best for that student. That was something that surprised me, that a lot of students didn't even know that they can be using these accommodations to their benefit so they can perform better academically.
You mentioned continuing education units earlier. Tell me a little bit more about that and what that looks like as you advance in your career.
At a certain period of time after you receive your license and you've been practicing, when it's time to renew, you have to do a certain amount of continuing education units. So with that, you're watching videos on the latest techniques to address certain communication disorders, cognitive disorders, and typically people will lean into doing continuing education on what setting they prefer, because as you can see, there are so many different settings that you can work in as an SLP, and no one can be extremely knowledgeable on everything.
Right.
So most SLPs, they'll either choose one setting or two and then kind of stick to that.
What's your setting of choice?
That's a good question. So girl, like I just graduated in December, so I'm still kind of figuring that out. I will say I do love working with children, but when I was working at the acute care hospital, I really liked that too. I really did like working at the rehab hospital with the elderly. So maybe a mix of both, but I don't know. I'm still deciding. But yeah, with the continuing education units, you just take courses, like you'll watch videos and then you'll go through a quiz to show that you have learned something from that course.
And is this hosted by an employer, a college? Where do you get these certifications from?
So there's numerous websites where you can get your continuing education unit hours. I say that I use speechpathology.com. I feel like that's been the easiest for me. I pay like an $100 a year membership for that. And then I have unlimited videos that I can watch. So I'm always going to meet my CEU requirements because of that.
So based on this in particular, the continuing education units, and also just some things you said about your experience, it sounds like to be a successful speech language pathologist, you, number one, need to be open to learning. You have to be a lifelong learner. That's what I'm hearing. I'm also hearing that you need to have empathy and compassion and be willing to work with different kinds of people. Is that right?
Yes.
And then I'm also hearing you suggest that you got to be able to project manage a little bit, especially as you're matriculating through school, because you're juggling clinicals and courses, and maybe you have to work another job to pay your bills. So time management and project management. So are there other key skills or character traits that you think would lend themselves towards people, specifically women, because this is a Women's History Month, women who are interested in this career field or want to learn more about it? Like, what are the character traits that they need to have?
I would say you touched on a decent amount of them. Like having that compassion is going to be so important, because you're going to constantly be around people that are high needs in at least one area. And you have to be able to take like the knowledge that you have in your head and word it in a way so that it's digestible to parents and other rehab staff members, like those physical therapists and those occupational therapists. So you have to be willing to, I guess, be articulate. And in addition to being articulate, you have to just be willing to put yourself in other people's shoes. You have to be willing to do that. Like see things from other people's point of view. And I feel like that lends to that compassion and that empathy as well. And you have to be determined. Like, 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of graduate school, 400 hours, unpaid hours.
Unpaid hours.
400
unpaid hours.
Where you're getting all of that experience. And then the process of getting into graduate school is not easy either. Like, you have to go through the application process, money, like those are things that you have to take in consideration when it comes to the amount of time to become a master in this field. But it's definitely worth it. It is. I feel like if you have a passion for helping people, teaching people, and you know you grew up being told that you were a yapper, then I feel like this is the profession for you. There is a path for you. Like, this is really the lane for people who have all of those characteristics for sure. And then it's so flexible. Like, I've told you all the different settings you can work in, and you can really customize it to you. Like, for me, if I wanted to work full-time in the schools, but then work part-time with the adult population, I could do that. Or if I wanted to do home health and go to people's homes and treat them there, and then do that full-time, or go independent and have my own LLC. Like, there's so many different ways that you can make money in this career, and then it's so rewarding. just so rewarding. It
I
really
can
is.
see it in you. I feel like you're really built for this. Like whenever you talk about your kids, and I remember one time you were telling me about the games you guys were doing and stuff. I'm like, that sounds like y'all just playing.
Right, that's what some people think it is. And I will say, when it comes to the younger kiddos, it is a lot of playing, but with that playing, you also have to be thinking while you're playing, how am I going to introduce this specific communication skill to this student? And then in the elementary setting, you might be playing like Connect 4 or like Candyland, but you're also, I say every turn or every other turn, you're going through like 10 different words with that student addressing their articulation goals. So it's play, but it's also
intentional play.
Yeah, intentional play. That's what it is.
That's
yeah.
good. That's good. Wonderful. Oh, I'm so glad we did this. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. If anyone watching would like to reach out to you or learn more from you, how should they get in touch with you?
You can message me on Instagram. Follow me on there. My profile is private, but you know, I might accept your follow. I might. It's _K.Monay_. And then I also have a LinkedIn page too. That's definitely a great place to catch me at. It's my first name and last name, so Kiara, Kiara, and then last name Monette.
And I'll put them on the screen and in the description as well, so people can reach out if they want to know more. Thank you so much for watching this video with me and my friend Kiara. I really hope you learned something from her experience as a speech language pathologist. Like she said before, if you want to reach out to her, click either the link to her Instagram or her LinkedIn in the description below. If you like this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Thanks so much again, and I will see you next time. Bye.